The California sun burned bright over the wide, glossy streets of Beverly Hills, where the hum of high-end cars blended with soft chatter drifting from outdoor cafes. It was the kind of place where people carried tiny dogs in expensive bags and treated cars like jewelry. On this street, parked right outside a boutique cafe, a brand-new Ferrari gleamed like a ruby under the afternoon light. The polished red body reflected everything around it, from palm trees swaying in the breeze to the curious eyes of passers-by who couldn't help but stare. But none stared harder than the boy, standing a few feet away, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn-out jeans. His name was Tyler, 15, skinny, with sun-bleached hair that curled awkwardly under the brim of a faded baseball cap. He'd been waiting outside the cafe for his mom, who cleaned tables there on weekends to make ends meet. His backpack lay at his feet, unzipped and spilling over with old notebooks and a dog-eared car manual he'd found in a free box at the library. Tyler loved engines. He didn't care if they belonged to rusty trucks or million-dollar sports cars. He wanted to know how they breathed, how they failed, how they could be brought back to life. He could hear things others couldn't, tiny knocks and rattles, small cries for help buried under shiny paint and chrome. And this Ferrari was crying. At first, he'd only circled the car, pretending to tie his shoelaces as he leaned closer to the exhaust, listening. A faint misfire, a subtle hiss that shouldn't have been there. He felt his heart race with curiosity. He knew he shouldn't touch it, but the urge pulled at him like a magnet. Glancing at the cafe window, he stepped forward, leaned in, and popped open the small inspection panel at the rear. Just a peek, he told himself. Maybe he could spot what was wrong. He imagined himself older, working in a real shop with real tools instead of scavenged wrenches from yard sales. Maybe someday he'd stand next to cars like this and people would trust him to keep them alive. Inside the cafe, Miranda Cole sipped her latte and checked her reflection in her phone screen for the 4th time in 5 minutes. She was wealthy enough not to have to prove it, but old insecurities crept in when she was around other people who actually noticed cars like hers. The Ferrari was her trophy, her daily reminder that she'd climbed out of her modest Midwestern upbringing and now sat under sun umbrellas, spending more on coffee than her mother once spent on groceries for a week. She liked how people stared at the car when she arrived. She liked the hush that followed her heels clicking toward the door. When she saw him through the glass, the boy bent over her car with his fingers tracing the edge of the open panel. Her chest tightened like she'd been slapped. She stood up so fast her chair scraped the tile floor, making the couple at the next table flinch. She ignored the half-finished latte and the pastry she'd only pretended to eat. Her heels struck the sidewalk with sharp, angry beats as she stormed toward the car. Sunglasses pushed up like a visor for battle, Tyler didn't even hear her at first. He was too deep in the quiet symphony of pistons and hoses and soft leaks that nobody else would have heard. "Hey, step away from my car!" Her voice sliced through the air, shrill enough to turn heads all along the patio. Tyler jumped back, hands raised in surrender, the small panel still open behind him. He tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. He looked down at his shoes, hoping they'd swallow him up before she could say more. But she was already on him, one perfectly manicured finger jabbing the air just inches from his chest. "Do you have any idea how much this car costs? Who told you you could touch it? Where's your mother?" Her words spilled out fast, sharp, meant to cut him down to size. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I heard something. The engine—" Tyler's voice was barely a whisper. He glanced at the car, desperate to explain that he hadn't meant any harm, that he might have even helped her if she'd just let him. But she wasn't listening. Her fury needed a target, and his scruffy cap and second-hand sneakers made him perfect. The small crowd gathering behind her made it worse. She felt them judging her, waiting to see how a woman with a Ferrari handled a kid who didn't know his place. "You heard something? You heard something?" She mocked him, repeating the words like they were a joke. "You're going to stand there with your greasy hands and tell me you know what my car needs? You're what, 12, 13? She glanced at his open backpack, the edges of the old manual poking out, and scoffed again. "This is Beverly Hills, not some rundown gas station. Get your hands off my car before I call the police. Or maybe I should call them anyway." Tyler's cheeks burned hot with shame and confusion. He'd never touched anything so expensive before, and now every eye on the sidewalk felt like it was drilling into his back. He stepped away, mumbling an apology he knew she wouldn't hear. He shut the panel carefully, almost tenderly, as if the car itself deserved more respect than the voice yelling at him. He could still hear it, that small hitch in the idle, the tiny breath of something about to fail. But his chance to fix it was gone before it ever really started. He picked up his bag, hugging it to his chest like armor, and backed away toward the cafe door, wishing he could melt into the floor. Miranda turned her fury on the onlookers next, daring them to say something with a glare that made a teenage couple pretend they hadn't been staring at all. She got into the Ferrari, slammed the door hard enough to echo down the street, and turned the key with extra force, as if to remind everyone that she still owned this moment. The engine coughed, to life, louder than it should have been, but she didn't notice. She revved it twice, shooting a glare at Tyler through the tinted glass, then shifted into gear. He watched her pull away, his small hands tightening around the straps of his bag. He knew she'd be back. The car would make sure of it. The red Ferrari didn't get far before the first stutter caught her off guard. Miranda rolled her eyes at the sputter, blaming the stop-and-go traffic crawling through the upscale street. She pressed harder on the gas pedal, annoyed when the engine responded with a cough instead of its usual silky roar. Behind her tinted sunglasses, she glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the boy's face still there, mocking her with his silence. But he was nowhere in sight, just palm trees and curious shoppers, pausing to watch a luxury car that wasn't behaving like it should. She gave the car another impatient push, but this time it jerked forward with an ugly hiccup. The engine made a sharp knock she'd never heard before. Horns honked from behind her as the Ferrari stalled halfway out of the cafe parking lot, blocking the lane. Heat flushed up her neck as she fumbled with the ignition, the soft leather steering wheel slick under her hands. Each twist of the key was met with a choking rumble that faded too soon. The same people who'd stared at the shiny car now watched her through their windshields with smirks that felt sharper than knives. Inside the cafe, Tyler had slipped into a back corner, hoping to disappear behind the humming espresso machine and stacks of cups waiting for his mother to finish wiping down tables. He'd been staring at the floor when he heard it, the unmistakable wheeze of the Ferrari giving up. His head snapped up just as he caught sight of the red flash through the window, dead still, in the middle of the lane. He could almost feel it, the loose clamp on the intake hose, the tiny leak begging for a quick fix. His fingers itched for his tools, the same battered kit he always carried wedged into the bottom of his backpack. A soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. Tyler. His mother stood at his side, worry pinching her eyes. "What did you get into out there? I saw that woman yelling." Tyler wanted to explain, but the words stuck behind the twist in his stomach. He just shrugged, eyes flicking back to the Ferrari, now hazard lights blinking as a line of luxury SUVs stacked up behind it. His mother followed his gaze and sighed, seeing the mess unfold. "Well, if she needs help, maybe she'll ask you nicely this time." She touched his shoulder like she always did when she knew he needed a push to believe in himself. Outside, Miranda slammed the door open, stepping out into the heat that seemed to mock her. She tapped furiously at her phone screen, muttering about tow trucks and mechanics who never answered when you needed them. Every minute felt like an hour as cars honked and people walked by, some with raised brows, others whispering behind cupped hands. She hated this, hated how small she felt standing there while her expensive car betrayed her. Then she saw him, the boy, standing near the cafe door, hugging that ratty bag to his chest like a shield. For a moment she wanted to ignore him, pretend she hadn't seen his small, knowing glance. Pride kept her rooted there, but each click of the key that ended in silence chipped away at her anger, leaving embarrassment and a sharp taste of helplessness. She hated needing help, but she hated being humiliated more. Huffing out a breath, she slammed the door shut again, heels clicking across the pavement until she stood in front of him, arms crossed. Tyler held her stare, nervous but ready. "You," she snapped, softer this time but still sharp. "Can you fix it? Or were you just pretending?" Tyler's throat tightened. He wanted to be angry, but all he saw was a car begging for a little kindness. He nodded once, not trusting himself to say the wrong thing. She stepped aside, a silent truce passing between them that felt fragile enough to break if he so much as breathed wrong. His mother peeked out the cafe door, pride and worry warring in her eyes, as Tyler shouldered his bag and crossed the parking lot like a boy walking into a storm. At the Ferrari's open hood, Tyler felt the street fade away. The honking horns, the mutters from annoyed drivers, even Miranda's sharp breaths dissolved as he opened his kit and found the right clamp, the right wire, the right touch. He knew exactly where the trouble hid. A slipped intake hose, a loose connector near the ignition coil, and quick fixes if you cared enough to listen. His small hands moved with practiced care, knuckles brushing hot metal, tiny beads of sweat tracing down his neck. The world outside the engine bay did not exist, just the machine and his heartbeat steady as the tools clicked and turned. Miranda hovered nearby, arms wrapped tight around herself as if that could protect her from the judgment that rolled off passing strangers. She watched him work, this boy with dirt under his nails and more focus than any grown man she'd ever paid to touch her car. Something about the way he moved made her chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with money or pride. He wasn't guessing, he was listening, and for the first time she wondered if maybe he'd been right all along. She caught herself biting her lip, an old nervous habit she thought she'd outgrown. Tyler finished the last turn of his screwdriver and pulled back, wiping his hands on the back of his jeans. He didn't look at her when he slid into the driver's seat. For a breathless second, Miranda half expected another humiliating cough from the engine. But when he twisted, "Key!" the Ferrari purred awake like a cat roused from sleep. Smooth, powerful, perfect. The line of cars behind her erupted into relieved motion, engines humming as the road cleared at last. She stood frozen, the soft growl of her car washing over her like an apology she hadn't earned. Tyler stepped out, leaving the Ferrari idling behind him. He didn't ask for thanks. He didn't expect it. He just started to close his kit, but Miranda's voice stopped him. It wasn't sharp this time, wasn't even loud enough for the drivers passing by to hear. "Thank you," she said, words stiff at first, like she hadn't used them in too long. Tyler shrugged, a shy half-smile twitching at the corner of his mouth before he turned back toward the cafe where his mother waited. The rich woman stood by her Ferrari, watching him go, her reflection small in the polished red door. For once, she didn't feel quite as big as her car, and somehow that felt exactly right.